It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene, brought to you by Fast Break Sports, the largest selection of cards and card supplies in Southwest Missouri. Now here's your host, Scott Puryear.
Welcome into another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. This is episode 31. I am Scott Puryear. As always, appreciate you tuning in and giving me a few minutes of your time as we talk local sports. And it's a very special guest on today with us is the Director of Athletics at Missouri State University, Mr. Kyle Moats. Kyle, thanks for joining me.
You bet, Scott. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And I know this is a very, we think it's the calm before the storm and not a busy time of year, but there really is no time anymore in athletics that's not a busy time, is there?
Yeah, I don't think so. Just because our seasons are over doesn't mean that we stop working. We've got conference meetings and obviously working on what's going to happen in the upcoming year. And then this year's a little bit different because we're already making plans to go to Conference USA. But we have a year left in Missouri Valley Conference, and that's what we're going to focus on.
And, of course, that announcement a few weeks ago about the move to CUSA. And I guess my question is, how much behind-the-scenes stuff has to happen over the next year while you're still trying to compete in the Valley, but yet branding and everything else that goes along with it, it's going to be pretty busy, isn't it?
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's one component of it is branding. We're certainly going to have to work with our alumni that are in those particular cities and let them know that we're coming to town, and that's another part of it. The communication part of it will be a big part. And again, we have to ramp up our teams and our scheduling. That'll be a part of it. And then understanding travel. That'll be another major issue in terms of how we're going to do that. But the biggest thing is really trying to figure out the budget and making sense of how we're going to allocate those funds as we move forward.
And I think back to when OU and Texas left the Big 12 for the SEC and how, it got leaked at I don't know if it was a conference meetings or something by another school, but this stuff has to be so secretive now because you really can't afford it to get out. And I know that the Friday morning it came out, it kind of hit the Ozarks like a ton of bricks. Wow, that type of thing. But my question is, how long was that in the making? When did the process start, and when did it become really serious?
Yeah, those are two kind of independent questions that lead to one. But there's been discussion and talk about moving to FBS probably for 4 or 5 years. But it wasn't really a reality until conference realignment started to move a little bit more. And then on top of that, we weren't quite ready. We didn't think maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We might have had an opportunity to go then, but we just didn't feel like we were ready to do it at that particular time. I would say it probably picked up, Scott, a little bit maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, where there was some more discussion. You had more movement coming from the conferences and more uncertainty there. I think once that happened, then that freed up some spots, if you will. Again, I tell people all the time, we just didn't make this decision. We just don't make it. You have to be invited. It's not that we declared that we're going to Conference X. And people just kind of shake their heads. They don't believe that, but that's how it works. So we had to be primed and ready to go. I never looked at it, and I've said this publicly many times, I never looked at it specifically going to a certain conference. I always wanted to be marketable and have all the things ready to go in case we got an invite from someone. Cliff was probably a little bit more aggressive in his comments than I was because I'm kind of like that guy, Scott, and you'll appreciate this. If you talk about you want to go play at Augusta and be a member at Augusta, you're never going to be a member at Augusta if you talk about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It ain't happening, right? I don't care how much money you have. Not going to happen. So my thought and my belief was more about just doing what we can do really well. And if someone then thinks that, hey, they're worthy of being in our conference, so be it. Then we'll have a decision to make. And that was always my theory on that. Again, our name was brought up a lot during the conference realignment through national publications and national outlets. But it wasn't something that we were actively pursuing. Now, we did have some conversation, like I said, a year and a half ago, that we were kind of in play a little bit, but it wasn't anything that we were going to do differently than what we were already doing. It was just hey, do you have an interest? Yeah, we have an interest, and then it kind of went from there. But that was the process of how we got to where we are. Now, there's a lot of things that happened between a year and a half and that Friday that it all came down. But that was kind of the overarching philosophy I had as we moved forward on conference realignment, because I'm perfectly happy with the Valley. I said that. I think the Valley is a really good conference, and obviously I still think it's a very good conference.
Were there other leagues that were inquiring in addition to CUSA?
Well, I think 4 or 5 years ago we might have had a few more at that particular time, but again, we weren't ready to make that plunge. But realistically, the last year and a half, Conference USA, there might have been some other ones, Scott, but we weren't interested in them necessarily. But Conference USA was the one that we were interested in, and it seemed to make sense both financially and the type of schools that were in that conference. That's why it was so appealing to us.
Going to use probably a lot of golf scenario analogies here today, because I know you and I are both golfers, and somebody walks up to you on a tee that you've never met. You get ready to hit, you small talk, and their first question is, why did we do this? What's your elevator speech answer to that for the move to CUSA?
Yeah, I think, again, people think it's athletically driven, and that certainly makes sense. I get that because it gets the most publicity, but it was probably second or third, maybe third or fourth on the overall reasons why we did it. It was more institutional and more for the profile of our university and where we could move forward many years from now. It was the next step. I'm sure it was similar to what we did back in, when we moved from mid-continent and then went to the Valley. There's certainly those types of reasons that were the same now as they were back then. But those types of schools you want to be associated with, it helps from enrollment. It certainly helps with the profile. Athletically, it was involved with as well. Television, the increased exposure we're going to have, that also is a factor. So those are the biggest reasons as to why we did it. Yes, there's a financial implication with all that, but we think there'll be a benefit and a gain moving forward being part of Conference USA.
And I think the thing that kind of caught a lot of people, the first reaction was, well, that's cool. I've heard of that league. And then they saw the map and they saw the other schools that are in it. And I was struck by how all those schools are kind of just like Missouri State. And when I think of CUSA back in the mid-'90s when it was formed, it was Louisville and Houston and Memphis and people like that are now Big 12 and other leagues. And I guess my point is it's made up of a bunch of schools like yourselves that may view this as a stepping stone to something else later on down the road, correct?
Well, Scott, we're not even in this one. We're worried about
I don't want to kick this one to the curb yet, but I mean, when you look at the big picture in 20, 30, 40 years, who knows what it might take. But, I mean, look at what Liberty has done. They've probably put themselves in a position now to maybe be invited by some schools that are considered that next step, the P5s or P4s or whatever we're calling them now with no Pac-12 going forward.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think the only way you continue to move up is to be able to move at the place that you can. And what I mean by that is some schools thought maybe they could go from FCS to the American. Well, that jump is hard to do. You can't necessarily do it. You have to be in sequential order, at least the way it is now. Now, 10 years from now, the game may change, right? But at least looking at how things were done in the past, it was kind of hard to make a huge jump. So you have to make that sequentially. And this was the first jump that we felt we needed to do. Again, I think it's the best thing for the future of the university. What happens 20 years from now or 30 years from now will be somebody else's responsibility. But I certainly don't want to put it where it's not going to be a good thing for us. I think it is a good thing for us. And again, if you do well here, then it makes opportunities for you moving forward. And that's the way I think you have to look at it.
Again, white tees to gold tees. You don't make that jump, right? You stop at the Blues for a little bit there, right?
There you go. Absolutely. Very good. I like that. In my case, Scott, we're going from the gold to the white.
Oh, me too. Yeah. Nothing better than that 60th birthday where I got to move up a tee to the blue tees. I really relish that moment. And and a lot of fun. But, one thing I think that people, they might have scratched their head a little bit was the comments about it being budget neutral. If they looked at the map and they saw the locations of the Conference USA schools, and then they look at a Missouri Valley map, explain how that works, because there will be more air travel, correct? And how does that all balance out?
Yeah, it's no question it's going to be more travel, and we've allocated resources based upon what we're going to get from the conference and what we're going to have institutionally. And it's going to be, again, somewhere in that $1 million range. It may be a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but we've allocated for that. And then when non-conference scheduling comes up, we're going to be the opposite maybe from what we used to be. Those non-conference will be bus. We won't go anywhere but bus trips on non-conference because our conference will be flights. So our schedule will have to change a little bit, but we feel like that'll be fine. There's enough schools that we can play in our geographic footprint that we'll be able to do that. Second, we've also going to have to give more resources to our student athletes in terms of Alston money and cost of attendance. More of our kids are going to get that, and we've factored that as well, along with 22 more scholarships on the football side. So our biggest challenge, and I think we all know this, and we've said this from day one, is we've got to be able to fund football at a level that's going to be competitive. And the university can't just say we're going to put $5 million more into football. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So where we have to do that is find incremental revenue, certainly with the television package that we have at Conference USA, that will help offset some of those costs. But really where we have to help is from a fundraising standpoint and an attendance standpoint, because we have to get people to come to our games, and that's where it makes a difference, is we can have that annual money coming in to our budget that will help offset some of those costs. That's the key to this whole thing, in my opinion.
How difficult as an AD was it? Because like I mentioned earlier, this had to stay under wraps, or else you run the risk of a leak, and then it all just kind of gets out of control with what people are saying before there's an announcement. But especially Ryan Beard in football, it's going to make that jump to FBS, and then your main revenue producing sports with the new hire of Conzo Martin and then Beth Cunningham. When were you able to kind of bring them into the loop and kind of say, hey, this is real, we're going to do this, and get the reactions, or was it literally the day of the announcement?
Well, it was a little bit of both, Scott. It was we told those particular coaches that you mentioned that there was some discussion. And that's really all I left it at, was some discussion. It was not any more than, hey, this is going to happen, because I didn't know if it was going to happen. I wasn't. That was the honest answer. There was some discussion, and we let them know that possibility could happen. We didn't know for sure this was going to happen until that Friday of the board meeting. Now, again, we had some conversation and said, hey, we think that this might be going the right way, but we didn't know about the vote of the president from Conference USA if we were going to be in or out. So it wasn't like this thing was, hey, 6 months we knew we had time to let everybody know. That was not the case. On both sides of things, they were very protective of the information, and we certainly were protective of the information in terms of confidentiality. We both had to be. And we didn't want to be ones that leaked information or got it out, because we felt like that would hurt our chances. And certainly Conference USA didn't want to do it as well, because they were posturing, I think, for other schools as well. So it behooved both of us to be pretty confidential in the process, and I feel like that's always the best way to do it if you're trying to get it done. Be honest with people. But, again, we didn't know for sure if any of it was going to happen until that Friday with the board meeting. Now, again, the board was aware, our board was aware of the situation in terms that we were having some communication with them. And if they were not in favor, then we wouldn't have gone down the road. But they were in favor of it, so therefore we continue to have dialogue with Conference USA.
Did that make it tough for you during the, when Dana Ford was let go and you're looking for a new coach? Because in the back of my mind, you had to know this was a possibility, but could you even say anything to the candidates that, hey, well, it may not be the Valley you're coming to coach in? Or how did you handle that?
Yeah, nope. There was no conversation about that. Absolutely none. our conversations were more about Missouri State and trying to elevate our program, not so much at a conference level, but at a national level. So to me, it didn't matter what conference we were going to be in. It meant more about Missouri State and what we were trying to elevate our program nationally. So there was not much discussion, if any, after the fact. Basically was a conversation with Conzo.
And what was Conzo's initial reaction when it became final?
He really didn't have much of a response in terms of good, bad, or indifferent. He just acknowledged it and basically said, "Hey, we got to win no matter where we're at." And I said, "I agree." So,
and I imagine. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Conzo's he's not. That's not a big worry of his. He just wants to do what's best for his team and let's figure out who we're going to play, and we got to win no matter where we're going. That's kind of his mantra.
And Ryan Beard, I imagine, was giddy up. Let's go.
I would say Ryan is the most excited person about this whole decision.
Yeah,
and yet he has the biggest hurdle of anybody, because of the resources that we currently have compared to, and you brought them up. I'll use them as the example because it's the highest in the level in terms of finances is Liberty. There's a big discrepancy there.
When does he get to add those 22, start adding them this coming year, or how does that work for the 25-26?
Yeah, not this year, but the following year.
Okay. So he can recruit, but he knows he's got 22 extras he's got to fill there, or can fill, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
What, looking through the list of Conference USA sports that they offer, men's soccer, men's and women's swimming and diving, were those the only two that were left kind of without a new league to go to?
Yeah, that's correct. Those three sports, men's and women's swimming, and then obviously men's soccer. So I think we're very close to being able to find a home for all three of them. Very, very close.
Okay. Yeah, and so that'll be coming this summer probably?
I hope so, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. What general reaction from the entire coaching staff? Was it kind of surprise, shock, excitement, a little bit of all of that, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, all of that. I think people, the biggest apprehension, if you will, is just about the funding, right? They just want to know how they're going to be funded. Other than that, I think they're fine, but they just all want to know how they're going to be funded. And a lot of our sports, Scott, we're funded fine, right? Even at the level we're at, we're competitive in a lot of them. There's some that we're going to have to increase, but most of them are going to be fine competitively. So the difference becomes travel, and there may be some salary increases, but nonetheless, I think we're going to be competitive in just about every sport that we have, or we wouldn't have made the jump because we couldn't add just $10 million just to do it. That's not something that's going to happen. So we're going to have to build up and lead up to that where we can make more money, and then the more money we make, we'll put back into the program. This
is probably a better question for Ryan Beard, but you were in the best FCS conference in the country in terms of quality of football. Going up a level to CUSA, have you talked to him? Is there really a huge jump compared with the upper echelon schools that were in the Valley? Or I mean, because I guess I go to that with the level of patience with him making that leap in terms of results.
Yeah, really good question. And I would say that South Dakota State, North Dakota State would probably give anybody in the Conference USA League a run for their money. And matter of fact, they would be very, very, very competitive in that league, in my opinion. So I don't think we're going to see much difference at the top than what we currently have with the Missouri Valley Football Conference. And I've said that. I said that publicly. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be much. We know what really good is. We've competed against it. And again, I just think there may be more of them with Conference USA because of the amount of money that they're putting into it. But in terms of the jump of how good those two institutions are compared to what we have in Conference USA, I don't think there's a huge jump. I don't think we're going to be that drastically different than what we've been accustomed to.
I know it's always been kind of a battle, making sure you're Title IX compliant over there. And somebody explained it to me kind of, a little more granularly, that it has to do with your female to male student ratio as a whole, the university, and that Missouri State, is it correct? It's almost 60-40 female. Is that right?
It is, Scott. Yeah, we're again, not to get too much into it, but you're exactly right. It's the female to male enrollment correlation that we have to have in our athletics department, which makes it a prong one, and that's what we have to have. When I first got here, we were 54, 46. That was a long time ago, but that 6% makes a huge difference because you gain 6% on one side, you lose it on the other side. So that's 12% that you're looking at. So that's a big difference, and it quite frankly is one of our biggest challenges that we have. The financial piece is always going to be a challenge, but roster management due to Title IX is another challenge for us.
It's a great thing if you're a male. You ought to be able to find a wife in 4 years over there, I would think, with that kind of odds. But, you're adding 22 more football players to it. How do you counter that and not affect the current roster caps like in baseball and other male sports that have been impacted by that because of the ratio numbers?
Yeah, well, we've as you know, we've added 2 sports. Mm-hmm. We've added stunt and then tumbling and acrobatics. So that is our way of trying to help on the 22. That should be about 60 to 65 by the time that they get done. Maybe not this first year, but as they get their program going in year 2, you're looking at somewhere in that 60 range. So the easiest way for people to kind of understand it is it's a kind of a 3-to-1 ratio. So for every male, you have to have 3 female student athletes. That's the easiest way to kind of do that. So the addition of those 2 sports, Scott, just make us come even with the 22 that we're going to add on the football side. That doesn't get us ahead in terms of the numbers.
There's just so much that goes into this now that I imagine 15 years ago when you came from Louisville to Missouri State, never in a million years would you have guessed that all these other things, transfer portal, NIL, all the factors now, open season basically, tampering with rosters. I'm sure that as an AD at a mid-major school, you've got people in your office all the time saying this is going on and what can we do? I need this. Is it a lot tougher as an AD now than it was even 3 to 5 years ago?
I don't know if it's tougher, Scott. I just think the issues are different, right? Mm-hmm. Funding and finances were always an issue, right? Always an issue. Roster management was an issue when I first got here, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just with the prong that we're in, it's something that you have to be able to. It's a federal law, right? It's a federal law. You have to adhere to it. So, and if you don't, then that's where you get into trouble. And you don't want OCR and Title IX coming knocking on your door, and that's what we don't want to have. So, anyway, I think those issues are still there. I think, when you talk about tampering, you talk about people paying kids, that was probably happening and been happening for 30 years or 40 years. Kids were getting paid by coaches and doing some type of thing. But now it may make it legal to pay them, even though it's pay for play, and it can't do that. Certainly, what we're doing now with NIL, but it's still, the Dukes and the Kentuckys and those folks are still getting the best players because their collectives are the most. But I do think there's more of a leveling off at the higher level in terms of competition, and it's still that still will be the same going forward. But it's still going to be hard for the mid majors for us to do it. And the frustrating part to me is, I think in our league, if I'm not mistaken, Scott, I think we had 14 out of 15, the top 3, first team, second team, third team in the Valley. I think 14 out of our top 15 were plucked to go on to, Power 5 schools because of NIL. So that's the part that we didn't necessarily lose that many in the past because you had to sit out, and that was a deterrent, which helped. Now it really is open season and free agency. That part's a little bit tougher because that really does hurt us. And if we continue to go down the road of rosters just being unlimited, which is what they're talking about with the the Power Fours, you just say, hey, you can have, instead of having a limit on your rosters, we're going to let you do whatever you want. That's also going to hurt us because you're stacking teams that could hurt us with the talent that would be at our level. So those two things have not helped us. It's made it more of a challenge, and those are the things I think that are. It's hard for me, but it's hard for our coaches, and therefore it is hard for the institution. And I think, again, I'm rambling here a little bit, but when you don't have the same roster or your same team every year, that disengages your fans, right? It's hard for them you want them to come and want them to be engaged and support your guys and gals. Well, hell, they don't even know who's on the team. That's hard to do, and that makes it. I think we're losing that for our fans, not just Missouri State. That's an industry-wide issue because everybody's got the same problem. You want fans to come and be engaged, and it's. I think from the college perspective, that was one of the things that made us unique, different than the pros. And now we're heading down that road just like the pros, and that part of me is disappointing because it's hard enough to get fans to come, and we just seem to hurting ourselves in college athletics.
Does that make you as an AD, and not just you, but mid-major ADs as a whole, have to be a little more patient and lenient with your coaches? Number one, because old coaches or older coaches are saying, I'm out of here. I don't want to mess with all this, but it may be harder and harder to find mid-major coaches because of that. I develop a kid, they leave because they've been offered something bigger and better somewhere else, or if I don't play a kid, they're gone, and stuff. It's just hard right now, isn't it?
It is hard, but here's what I would say to that. I still think that coaches want to coach. We still have the ability to have success and get to the NCAA basketball tournament. And if that happens, and you're able to do that with finding the right talent for that year, developing that talent maybe for a year or two, and if you lose them after that, there's still a need for that at the next level if you can't do that. And what I mean by that is if our coaches do really well, they're going to get opportunities to move on. And once if there's opportunities for coaches to move on, then we'll still have good coaches because they'll want to go to the Power 4 or Power 5 level and coach. It may force some coaches not to be in the profession for 30 years at one location. I think those days are going to be really hard to do, but nonetheless, the environment has changed. And your first comment about evaluation, I think that is very difficult. And right now, as I think about it, it's you can't build necessarily a program and say, hey, this kid was a freshman, he did this, and look at what he's done in his senior year or his fifth year, whatever it may be, and say, hey, this coach has done a great job of developing talent, and where we were year one compared to year three, he deserves credit for that. That's becoming harder and harder because it's a year-to-year evaluation. So you really need to look at kind of your data and analytics to figure out how are you going to get kids coming in here on a one-year basis after they go in the portal and the free agency, and how do you determine to get those kids? It's a different thought process. It's I don't know how great a recruiter you have to be because back in the day, somebody that was just a great recruiter was everywhere, and they could see it, and they could go to 4 or 5 games a week, and boy, they just couldn't do whatever they wanted to do. I think those days are those days are gone. It's who's in the portal, what are the analytics, how can it help us for this particular year based upon the team you're trying to assemble. Those are completely different ways of looking at things for your coaches. Now, I'm not saying every sport is like that, Scott, but I'm thinking more of basketball for sure, and maybe a little bit of women's basketball because they're kind of catching up to the men here pretty quick.
And if you want to keep them, if you're that coach, you got to have something to offer them from the NIL standpoint to try to keep them around besides loyalty and things of that nature. Where would you rate or assess the NIL program at Missouri State, and what are you guys doing to make that better?
Yeah, I would say we're in the maybe average right now. We're right kind of in the middle of the pack, and that's okay because my issue is no matter what your number is, it's not going to be as much as the Power Fours or Power Fives. And And our league has got a great reputation. If you look at the kids that they've taken from our league, they're being successful at the next level, which means they're going to continue to keep coming back to our league because we've got good coaches and they've done well. So we are a prime target for kids being plucked every single year. So I don't care if we've got $1 million in NIL, the Power Five are going to have more than that. They're going to be able to pay them more. So you might be able to retain them a year longer, and you might be able to get them the first time around, but it'll be hard to keep them. And that's just the evolution of where we're at with NIL. But you certainly got to have a pot of money or a pool of money to help recruit and then help retain. But the chances of keeping those kids longer than a year or two is this probably is not going to be the case. And people I know are frustrated with that, but that's just kind of where we're at. If they're really good, they're going to have chances to go places. If they're not very good, then you're probably not going to want them. So it goes both ways.
Kind of getting toward the end of this and wanted to touch on the personal side of Kyle Moats. And you know, as an AD at a school like this, you're a target. I mean, you're a target for everything. Good hires. You don't hear about the good hires. You hear about the bad hires. And, you know, everything falls in your lap as the director of athletics. And you know, I just kind of want to give you the credit of knowing that when you came here, you were replacing Bill Rowe. And that was like probably what Gene Bartow felt like with John Wooden on a different level there in terms of Bill's reputation here and, you know, being around forever and everybody knowing him. Does that sting you still now, or have you learned that, you know, that just comes with the territory? How do you approach being Kyle Moats in this environment?
Yeah, as you've mentioned, Coach Rowe, as I always say, he's got the keys to the kingdom, right? He can do what he needs to do, and that's not going to change, and I've never tried to change that. Again, this is a cliche, Scott. You just can be who you are, right?
Yeah.
I can't be Bill Rowe. No, I mean, no way am I. And I really don't have any intention of trying to be Bill Rowe, right? That's never been my intent. It's just got to be what I think is right. If I think what I do is correct, the way I do it is based on good information, and you treat people right, that's all I can do. And others will have to make that decision whether they like it or they don't like it. But, you know, we are different. We are not drastically different, but we're different. And, again, I don't hold that as a sting, or I don't hold that in a grudge by any means. The success that we've had at Missouri State are a great correlation, a great tribute to Coach Rowe and all the people that he's had. So I look at it as a benefit to be able to take it over and try to steward the best way I can, and that's all I can do. Again, people can agree with that or disagree with that. I think probably one of the major issues that we're different. I'm probably a little bit more private and not as much of a information gatherer to give to others. I think Coach loves information and loves to tell you he's got information. I think that, and that's not a bad thing. But I think that may be the difference of us, you know, and that's okay. That's all right. It's just a different way of approaching things.
Well, and you must be doing something right, because there's not been a ton of turnover. I look at Keith Gutton and Holly Hesse. You lost two great ones there after decades of doing great stuff with the Bears, and you've been there 15 years, so something must be okay over there. But you look at it, and it's a different place now, different phase. Now you got a new president coming in. Do you feel like, everybody always has the old adage that, new president's going to want his own guy? Is there more pressure on you now with Cliff leaving to make this transition smooth and get the attendance up and roll right into CUSA?
Yeah, I don't know about that, Scott. I think I always put pressure on myself, regardless of who the boss is.
Sure.
Again, you know, and we both publicly have said it. Cliff is a friend. He was always my boss, and I never forgot that. But we were also friends, and he understood athletics really well, and was very, very supportive. And you can't do this job if you don't have a good relationship with your president. You just can't do it. I'm telling you, it just won't work. And it's only as good as your relationship with the president. And I have been blessed and very thankful that Cliff and I really saw eye to eye on a lot of things. There wasn't many things that we didn't see eye to eye on, and if we did, that was okay. We both respected one another. So I fully expect that Biff will be very similar to that. He loves athletics. He comes from a background of both parents being coaches. He has an athletic training background, which, as you know, Scott, there's no more gossip in an athletic department than at the training room, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody knows what's going on in the training room.
Yeah.
So he understands that, and I think in this community, athletics is really important, and I think he knows that. I think he's talked to enough people to understand that. So, again, I look forward to working with him, and I've talked with him about Conference USA throughout the process. He's been very supportive of that, and again, it'll be a different person. But again, I keep my head down, work as hard as I can, and if somebody likes what we're doing, that's great. If they don't, then they'll have to make a decision. That's all I can worry about.
How excited are you about this new era coming up? I mean, has it kind of reinvigorated you this summer, and knowing that leaving one and going into a new one, has that kind of been I guess, an exciting thing for you?
Yeah, I think any time is exciting, but it's a major challenge, right? We got a lot of heavy lifting to go, and we're going to need everybody pulling together for us to be successful, because we don't want to not be successful, because that will upset folks. And I think we can be successful, or I wouldn't have recommended that we make the jump. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited we got 1 year left in the Valley, and I want to make sure we do things the right way there, and then look forward to moving into Conference USA and making a dent in that, not just participating, but be somebody that can be leaders within the conference and be an asset. And that's what we talked to them and told them that we would be when if we got the opportunity to move into Conference USA. So, yeah, I look forward to it. But we got some heavy lifting to go.
Very good. Kyle, I appreciate your time. I know you got a lot going on now, and thank you for taking time to visit with us and answer the questions. And best of luck to you and the Bears in 24-25.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Be good. Have a good summer.
You bet. You too. Steve Warren segment in 3, 2, 1. Not going to have a look ahead or Scott's thoughts this week, because we wanted to talk about a special event coming back to Springfield again this year. Our pleasure to have on the line with us Steve Warren, the former Kickapoo High School, Nebraska football standout, NFL player with the Packers, and he's bringing his camp back to Springfield here next week, matter of fact. Steve, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. It's June 14th. That's a Friday, a week from this Friday, from the field to the court. Steve Warren partners with his old Kickapoo buddy, Anthony Tolliver, the NBA player, former Creighton basketball star, to put on this camp. And Steve, I know it's always a great time for you to come back home and do what you can for the community.
Yeah, it's always fun to get home and, one, see my family, two, to be able to give back and offer some guidance and assistance to some of the youth football players around there. And something me and Anthony love doing. We don't get to get home too often, so whenever we get home, it's always good and always great to be able to do the camp and then see some family.
And again, the camps will once again be out at the Betty and Bobby Allison Sports Town out by the airport, Friday, June 14th. You've added a volleyball camp this year as well. It's for grades 4 through 8 for those listening out there that have kids that want to participate in. It's absolutely free. 9 to 11 a.m. for the football and volleyball in the morning. Basketball from noon to 2 p.m. In the afternoon on that Friday the 14th. What was the impetus behind adding volleyball this year?
We were approached with that by one of our committee members that has a volleyball background, and she was friends with Loriana Vandersloot. So it was just something we felt like we needed to add. I've got volleyball players in my family too, with my nieces and cousins that coach volleyball now and play Division I volleyball. So it was we're kind of a volleyball family too, and whatever we can do to offer more services and to help build any sport, that's really what we've been trying to do. So when Anthony and I talked about it, it made sense and it was good timing. And of course we had when you can add an Olympian to do the volleyball part of it, that never hurts.
Yeah, you and Anthony never were Olympians, so she's got you guys beat in that area, doesn't she?
She's got us beat in that area.
Yeah.
Got us beat in that area. She's a Husker too, so that's that's always good too. Is I can bring the Nebraska family with me.
Exactly. So how do people sign up for this? How do parents get their kids signed up? Can they register on site, or do they need to register in advance? What's the method here?
We'd like them all to register online in advance, and you can go to WarrenAcademy.com under the Field to Court tab in our events tab. There's a pop-up that'll pop up too when you go to the website, but WarrenAcademy.com, and you can go and choose either volleyball and basketball or basketball and football are the two options that you can choose, or you can just do the camps individually by themselves.
And how many kids do you have out there last year? Because I came out and I saw basically a turf full of kids out there for the football.
Yeah, I think we had around 150 or so for football, and then about the same amount for basketball, maybe a little less. We have to do a little bit less for basketball just because of the number of goals, but well over 100 in both camps. So we were excited about that. And
are they getting close to being capped? Do people need to act pretty quickly, or?
Yeah, they should act pretty quickly. We've still got some space. Of course, we work with the Boys and Girls Club too, so they have a number of slots that are allocated to them. And then the open slots there's still some open, but I'd act quick.
Tell me what Steve Warren's doing now. You know, you've got your Warren Academy. Tell us about it, and I know you've got a budding football star in your own household up there as well.
Yeah, that part of it has taken off some with my own son. So we're about to start the camp circuit today, which I'm excited about, and then I'm not excited about. But yeah, I've got a son that's a quarterback. He's a 15-year-old freshman, soon to be sophomore, and he's gaining a little traction. We're going to Iowa State. Michigan invited him to their camp, so we're headed to Michigan Sunday, Kansas State, and then Mizzou. So he's been in contact with Mizzou and their coaches, and so we're excited for his future and to see what it holds. He's still got to get on the football field. Like I said, he was a freshman. He played some varsity last year, and he's building something. So we'll see what he does with it. And then I've got the Academy and Dream here in Omaha. So our after-school programs are still running strong. We're at 500 kids every day through our after-school programs, and then with the sports side of it, we're training a lot of football kids, a lot of soccer kids. Those are our two main sports. So I'm staying busy. And then, of course, with my own family, and my daughters are both in college now, and then I've got a younger 4-year-old that's ripping and running all over the place and keeping me young.
You know, your son, what's your son's first name again?
Braylon,
yeah. And he's about to enter a whole new world than you had with NIL and transfer portal and all those things out there now. If Steve Warren would have had NIL at Kickapoo in Nebraska, who would he have wanted an endorsement deal with?
That's a good. I probably would have had to do it with my parents' barbecue restaurant at the time. So
that doesn't count. You were getting that anyway, right?
Right. That does not count.
Yeah.
You know, of course, like all the big ones, right? Like these kids with Nike and Gatorade and those type of things. You know, that's amazing. It's good for those kids that they can go out there and, you know, make some money off their name and their image and likeness. And of course, there's the charitable side of it, and they're able to give back to their community and do things for organizations and get out there and now, you know, reap some rewards from it. So I'm excited for him. It's definitely a new world, and my son, it'll probably be different by the time he gets to be where he's at his senior year, but it's exciting times.
If they'd had that going in Nebraska in the mid to late 90s, can you and as good as those teams were, can you imagine what the NIL pool would have been for you guys back then?
It would have been outrageous. It would have been outrageous. I can't. I hate to think about it just because it would have been so nice to have that back then. Most of us were, you know, sharing money to go buy meals and stuff at the time. Even though we were getting fed at the university, we were still college kids, and you still want to eat extra and go out and hang with your friends. And to have that extra spending cash would have been nice. But I cannot imagine what it would have been like if we were in that NIL age back when we were winning championships and running the world.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there'd been a pretty good pool, I would think, to draw from on that.
Yeah.
So again, it's from the field to the court. The date is Friday, June 14th. It's out at the Betty and Bobby Allison Sports Town, again, out by the airport. It's a free camp, football, volleyball, and basketball. Steve Warren, Lori Endicott, Anthony Tolliver will be out there. A chance to learn from some of the best and some of the best people in town, too. Steve, I know everybody appreciates you guys coming back and giving back, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon, is it?
No time soon. You got that right.
And they can go to warrenacademy.com to get their kids signed up?
That's correct. warrenacademy.com. Get your kids signed up today, and we'll be out there teaching them everything we know.
Very good. Steve, again, thanks for your time, and have another great camp, okay? Appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
You bet.